I would say Weezer is okay. I don't turn them off when they come on, but I don't seek them out either.
Okay, so yeah, that's a big
that's a
swing
miss.
and a miss.
Yeah,
yes.
that's a miss.
I
Yes. It's a check swing foul. Made contact, but not a base hit. All right, Mike, let's talk about this game Friday night. So much going on, right? I mean, there was the special teams mistakes. They gave up a lot of points. Kyle McCord was great. LeQuint Allen was great. They win this game in overtime. What of all those things? What stood out to you the most? Like when you think back to that game Friday night, what rises to the top of all that?
That it feels similar to the Georgia Tech game in that if not for special teams, they win this game by double figures. So that's kind of my biggest takeaway because they basically handed UNLV 14 points from just the punting unit. And, going into the game, we were all concerned about what was going to go on with their field goal kickers. And, if it's a field goal game, which it ended up being a 3-point game, then, is that a huge advantage for UNLV because of Syracuse's woes from the kicking standpoint? And it turned out to be the punting unit that was their downfall in this one. So, if not for handing UNLV 14 points, if not for McCord red zone interception, then, this is probably a more comfortable game. But on the flip side of that, if UNLV intercepts one of two golden opportunities on Syracuse's game-tying drive at the end of the game, then UNLV comes out of there with a win. So there's a little bit to both sides of it, but certainly it's the special teams that remains the most concerning for me.
Those two runs that LeQuint Allen had, I know you've been covering this team for a while. Those were two of the hardest runs that I've seen a Syracuse player make in recent memory. The one on fourth down where it looked like he was stopped at the end of regulation and just somehow found a way to will his way to a first down, then obviously the game-winning touchdown. Can you put into words like what he has meant to this offense? And I guess I feel like that run by him, the fourth down and then the touchdown run, like those have a chance to be defining moments of this season. Can you kind of put into words what he's meant to this team?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked the first, 4 games about how Syracuse hasn't been able to establish the running game, but that hasn't meant that LeQuint Allen has not been a big part of the offense. And when they got into key situations in this game, he's the guy that they turned to. And, I always put out an article the day after a game that's my 5 biggest takeaways from the game. And one of the takeaways that I had this week was that those 2 runs are Fran Brown's dart if you were to epitomize them in a play. Because the detailed preparation that he had to go through in order to be strong enough to absorb those tackles and get through them, the relentlessness to be able to continue to move your legs and stay balanced and get those first downs and get the touchdown, and then the toughness to be able to do that while he was clearly battling some sort of leg injury that had him limping around when he wasn't playing. Those 2 sequences are Dart in a nutshell, and I think it's that culture and it's the preparation and everything that Fran Brown preaches that allowed LeQuint Allen to be able to fight through and do that.
We saw Kyle McCord throw the ball 63 times, and their passing attack is very difficult to stop. He continues to spread it around. Gadsden got back to looking like a Rondé Gadsden. Trevor Pena continues to produce. Jackson Meeks, like he's got so many weapons. Do you think it's? I feel like I ask you some semblance of this question every week or some variation. But is it possible to keep this up? The way that they are, I don't want to say they're one-dimensional because they were able to run the ball some, but throwing this much, can they maintain this level of success throwing the ball this much throughout the season?
I think so. And, you said they did run the ball well a little bit in this game. And what's funny is UNLV had a top 10 rushing offense, I think even top 5 rushing offense in the country coming in. Syracuse held them to less than half of their season average, and Syracuse actually outran UNLV in this game. Now, part of that was time of possession and number of plays and all of those things, but that's still the reality of the situation. I think they can be more balanced. I think what you saw Friday night is probably more what the balance should be. Now, Kyle McCord throwing the ball as many times as he did was part of the fact that all of their drives were long, like double-digit play drives. They had 90-some-odd plays on the game. So, of course, he's going to throw the ball more than normal when you have that much time of possession, that many sustained drives. But this isn't, a situation where it's like, well, it was Ohio, and how much can we take away from it? We're 5 games in. We're almost halfway through the season, and they have scored, other than the Stanford game where they, missed a bunch of opportunities and basically played about as bad as they could. They've been, I believe, over 30 points in every game. So, their offense is moving the ball. They're putting up numbers. It's a top 5 passing offense in college football. They're putting up a lot of points. I think throwing the ball 2/3 of the time just might be what this team is, and might be that way all season.
Kind of makes up for what we saw at the end of last season, right, where they were running the ball, 80% of the time out of necessity. Let's talk about the defense. How would you assess the performance on Friday?
Definitely a lot of ups and downs. Now, before I get to that, one more quick thing on the passing attack situation. Some of those quick throws to the outside and those little swing passes are basically extensions of the run game. So keep that in mind, too, when you're looking at the pure numbers of rushes versus passes.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
As far as the defense goes, the first 2 possessions were just about flawless. And then it seems like from then on up until overtime, UNLV pretty much did what it wanted. Now, I still think the biggest issue is tackling, because there were 2 or 3 of those drives in regulation where if Syracuse makes a tackle, those drives are stopped and UNLV doesn't continue them and doesn't get points. So they're in position in some of those situations, but even though UNLV didn't run for the number of yards that they wanted, they still averaged over 5 yards a carry. Williams was great throwing the football. They had guys that were open. So I still think there's a lot to clean up there. Pass rush is certainly still an issue. They rush 3 a lot, and if Fidel Diggs is not getting there, it seems like they don't have anyone getting there. I think they're at their best when they're bringing an extra guy, a 4th guy, or maybe even a 5th guy. That seems to be their best option to get consistent pressure. But the encouraging thing is they had a red zone stop late in the game in the 4th quarter that held UNLV to a field goal before that blocked punt that tied it. And then in overtime, they had maybe the best series of the game in stopping UNLV, holding them to a field goal. Fidel Diggs' sack on 3rd down was huge, and they were able to make the play that they needed to help win the game. But certainly still a lot of questions there. Inability to stop the run, inability to get pressure on the quarterback are huge concerns.
All right, let's talk about special teams. We got to get to it. You said that they won this game handing UNLV 14 points, and you're right. Do you think it's just an alignment issue, like with the 2 punts? Was it? I mean, is it more than that? Because it's the special teams unit. We've seen some issues. Some on the punt team, some on field goal kicking. We've seen a couple kickoffs go awry. What can be done from what you see to fix what happened in that game Friday night?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, I've noticed in Syracuse's punt formation, they've got 2 guys that are kind of back and in front of the punter. And in a lot of other formations for teams across the country, they've got 3 guys back that are in front of the punter. So I don't know if having 3 guys back there would help, but then there also seems to be a miscommunication on who's supposed to be responsible for blocking who, because in each of those situations where the punts were blocked, it looked like one of those 2 guys that was back in front of the punter went after a guy who was already being blocked by someone else, which allowed there to be a free runner. So I think there's 2 things that could be done. They could look at possibly throwing a 3rd guy back there. Maybe that will make the assignments a little bit easier. But also, even if they remain with those 2 guys back there, there has to be better communication and understanding on who's responsible for who, because forgetting to block people, it's one thing if you're getting beat on blocks, you're at the right guy and he just beats you. It's another to completely forget to block people and have 2 or 3 rushers completely wide open, untouched, and that's what happened in both of those situations on Friday.
All right, let's look ahead now to the next opponent, Mike. It's NC State, an NC State team that was ranked to start the season, not living up to expectations, obviously. They've suffered some tough losses. They lost their quarterback to injury in this latest game. What do you make of the Wolfpack? And I guess how big of a challenge do you see this being for the Orange?
It'll definitely be a challenge because anytime you play an ACC team on the road at their place, especially at night, that's going to be a tough environment. The good news is Syracuse has had practice with that a little bit with their game Friday night, in that they went to a hostile environment against a good team and a late night game and were able to pull that out. I think UNLV is better than NC State. I think Georgia Tech is better than NC State. Stanford's better than NC State. So or at least on par. You feel like, Syracuse, with the way that they played, especially offensively all season, that they should be able to put up points. I think the biggest thing is, even with NC State having their backup quarterback in, how does Syracuse stop the run? How do they pressure the quarterback? Can they limit NC State from scoring points? Because if they do, NC State has given up a lot of points this year. Their defense has shown to be vulnerable, especially against the pass. I think Syracuse could have a lot of success putting up points, and the biggest thing is going to be, do you not have a bunch of special teams blunders that hands points and momentum to NC State? And can your defense get a few stops to allow Syracuse to, maybe get out to a double-digit lead early in this game and try to take control and get the crowd out of it?
You think we'll see Marlowe wax Saturday? How close do you think he is from what you've been able to tell to coming back?
I guess no. I think it makes more sense because they've got the week off after that, right, and then the short week to the Pittsburgh game. It seems to me to make the most sense to not force him back now, but to wait until that point, sort of use the bye week to try to get him as close to game shape as possible, and then have him come out against Pittsburgh and return to the lineup at that point. I wouldn't completely rule it out, because whenever you've got a guy like Marlowe Wax with his determination and work ethic and all of that, I'd never put it past him, even if it's not at full strength, but maybe only on third down plays or certain package situations, whatever it is, or just as a blitzer. It wouldn't completely surprise me, but my gut says that the Pittsburgh game is probably a little bit more realistic.
All right. I agree with you. Although, we're kind of getting in that timeline, right? They said about 6 weeks. Yep. It's been about 6 weeks. So hopefully we'll hear some good news on Marlowe Wax sooner rather than later. Mike, as always, we appreciate the time. We'll see you on the TV version of Orange Nation later tonight.
Look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
All right, that's 7 to 7:30 tonight on News Channel 9. Mike McAllister will be our guest, and with that, we'll hit our final timeout in hour number 1. Again, Fran Brown's press conference coming to you live at the top of hour number 2. We are back after this on ESPN Radio.